the first government in the history of Canada that has deployed a credible plan to fight our climate pollution. Today,
look at her face. She doesn't believe him. Stephen Gibo, he's an absolute lunatic. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. Today we've got Vassie Capello's embarrassing Stephen Gibo on the carbon tax, his flip-flopping. He's backpedaling himself into a corner and he's dragging Mark Carney with him. He's starting to smear the ick of the carbon tax all over Mark Carney. He's kind of putting words in his mouth. And on the flip side, you're going to see the perfect juxtaposition here of Pierre Poilievre talking about the carbon tax, talking about the oil and gas industry with common sense, with honesty. We got a bunch of other stories here. Let's jump into this. We got this one from Chariste. New Ecos poll showing the Liberals at 32%, Conservatives 39%. This is more dirty data coming from Ecos, aka Frank Graves, a guy who hates Pierre Poilievre. I'm not buying this for 1 second. When it comes to polling, Ecos most heavily out of all of them favors the Liberals the most. We also got this posted on this guy's account. It's so funny. Conservatives' leave has just narrowed to just 7 points, a significant shift. Yeah, right. These people are dreaming. Look at this. Yeah, right. This is not actually happening. And going from the source here on Ecos' website, dirty data. Let me guess, they went to the Liberal convention to run this poll. Here, I fixed it for you. This one's off 388. Yeah, 45%, 21%. No one has, and Ecos is fake news. My company invested billions in pipelines abroad. So he's talking about UAE and Brazil. This is Mark Carney. There's a whole committee video on this I've showed on the channel before, where Pierre just absolutely grills him on this, where he wants to shut down pipelines in our country, but he has no problem investing in other countries. And he's always got an excuse why. Next up, we got this one. Says Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board reaffirmed their policy that prohibits the pride flag from being flown at schools. Well done. How about we just stick to Canadian flags on flagpoles in Canada? How about that? Is that crazy? Next up, we got this one. So just on one of the previous videos I've mentioned, Amazon shutting down their distribution center in Quebec due to the stuff with the unions and what was it, 1,700 jobs, something like that being lost. We've got this one here. Stellantis. Remember we gave them like $15 billion incentives? They're moving back to America. This clip here is from American News.
Stellantis Investments returns 1,500 jobs to their Illinois plant. They're going to produce their new mid-size pickup in Illinois, and they're going to build their next-gen Dodge Durango at their Detroit complex.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the next-gen Dodge Durango looks like. Is that electrified? Is it a hybrid? Hopefully the latter for
the Trump administration
investors in Stellantis.
On EVs.
No, and consumers really not that hot on EVs either. It's interesting to see Olaf Scholz in Germany wants to really push ahead, obviously, because they've invested, Volkswagen, Daimler, and BMW, so much in electrification. But yeah, this is interesting. You know, they're also pulling their production down from Canada into the U.S., Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan.
We absolutely need to get our money back. Like, there should not be one dime that stays within this company. Trudeau lost billions on this. He should have to pay this out of his own bank account. Next up, we've got this buffoon, Stephen Guilbeault. So we got Vassie Capello's here, grilling him on flip-flopping on the carbon tax. This is just getting so embarrassing every day.
I point to you, again, on multiple occasions, that there were progressive allies of yours who were saying that there were replacements, other tools that could replace the consumer carbon tax. I'll read you exactly what you told me 9 months ago. If there's a measure somewhere that someone can find and point to me that will help us achieve 10% of 2030 targets at no extra cost to consumers lying around under a rock somewhere, someone needs to show it to me because I haven't seen it. Have you seen it now? Because I don't understand what's changed in the interim other than Justin Trudeau leaving.
As I said, I mean, the fact that the leadership candidates have said that they wanted to reconsider the consumer.
I'm nervous because I'm lying again because this guy is one of the worst liberals.
Portion of carbon pricing. I mean, I basically have two choices here. I can stay in the party and continue help fighting to protect the environment, fighting climate change, or go pick my bags and go home. And I don't think that's a very viable option for me, especially with the threat of a possible Poilievre election who doesn't even recognize the threat of climate change, who, like Donald Trump, would probably pull us out of the Paris agreements. So
yeah, it's not that viable of an option, is it? When you're involved in a $254 million scandal of funneling taxpayers' money into your own company. Not that viable, right? You wouldn't want that cash cow to end.
My team and I are looking at, okay, well, if we don't have the fuel charge anymore, what else can we do to compensate? And there are possibilities. And Mark Carney has said exactly that. Like if we want to remove something from the equation in terms of our arsenal to fight climate change, then we have to come up with a new measure or use some of the existing measures, but maybe tighten them up a little bit so that they give us more bang for our bucks.
This is going to go down as one of the biggest scams in Canadian history.
And you know, I would just point out he hasn't detailed any of that to Canadians. And I guess it's on behalf of Canadians who are watching, who are incredibly concerned, as I know you are, about the impacts of climate change, that I ask, are you so sure the Liberal Party will continue to be best positioned? And not vis-a-vis the Conservatives, who, you're right, have detailed nothing and deserve hard questions about that. But just in general, I'm thinking of other things that you have put on the table that you have recently walked back, including, for example, a net zero electricity grid, which was supposed to be 2035 and is now 2050. Jonathan Wilkinson, the energy minister, a few weeks ago told me that if he were still running for leader, he would have, rethought the emissions cap, for goodness sakes. I don't even know if the candidates are wedded to the emissions cap on oil and gas anymore. Yeah,
he said that not even a couple weeks after he was out on camera, puffing his chest out, saying how great it is. These people will say anything for money.
Can you really look at Canadians who are concerned, deeply concerned about the climate crisis and say the Liberal Party is going to reach the targets that the government has set out? Because nobody is detailing how they're going to do that, and they're abandoning the stuff you've put in place.
Well, I beg to differ on the clean electricity regulations, because we never assumed that those regulations would enable the Canadian grid to be carbon neutral by 2035, because the regulations only enter into force in 2035. So we're giving public utilities, electricity companies across the country 10 years to prepare for the entry into force of those regulations. So,
oh, please, Gibo, we've heard enough. This guy's such a liar. They want to force everyone to have electric vehicles, throwing billions of dollars of our money at electric vehicles, and every single one of these plants, one after the other, Stellantis, Lion Electric, you name it, they're all going under, they're all folding up, they're all switching back to gas-powered vehicles, and they're moving back to America. You guys have screwed us over so bad. We could have taken, instead of giving $15 billion to Stellantis, you could have built a bridge from Vancouver to Vancouver Island. You could have done something that would have been at least of value. They could have taken that money and gone and built the framework of an entire new city, something we need. Invested in some major infrastructure to help mass produce homes. They could have done something that would have really helped us. But instead, they just wasted on these stupid projects that enriches their own pockets. This needs to be criminally investigated. Enough is enough.
It's impossible, if the regulations comes in place in 2035, that we would go from a grid that is emitting to a grid that is carbon neutral the same year. That's just physically impossible. So we're not backing down on that. In fact, although not a lot of people are talking about it, the clean electricity regulation is one of the most material things we've done to tackle emissions in this country. It is millions of tons of CO2 that will never make it to the atmosphere because of those regulations. It means a cleaner grid. It means a grid also that will become more affordable over time for Canadians. And it means jobs all across the country in the renewable energy sector.
Meanwhile, you've squashed our economy, our GDP. China is pumping out the pollution beyond belief. We don't even affect the planet all that much, 2%. This guy has no problem with destroying Canadian lives. 40 million people having to endure their stupid taxes for this ideological crusade.
In terms of the cap on oil and gas emissions, I continue to believe that it is a good piece of policy, and that for a number of reasons. Every sector should do their fair share when it comes to reducing their pollution.
How about China? Did you talk to them? You don't talk to them in the stern tone, because they're your good buddies that help you make money, right?
The oil and gas sector should do that as well. And I have spoken with Mark Carney about that, and he shares my belief on that.
This guy's going to drag down Mark Carney. He's trying to get away from the carbon tax, and this guy's just slathering him just all over with that dirty carbon tax.
We are committed to continue moving forward with that.
But that's Mark Carney. I don't know where, nobody else has come out and said anything. And I have the energy minister, who on multiple occasions came on this program to defend that cap, now all of a sudden saying there could be other tools. I think, again, I'm coming at it from perspective of people who are worried about climate, who you and your colleagues defended a series of policies for a number of years and now all of a sudden are no longer wedded to them in the same way. Like, why should they trust you on this file?
Well, because we're the first government in the history of Canada who've taken climate change seriously.
The first government in the history of Canada to have more scandals than all the other ones combined. The first government in Canadian history to have scandals not even in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We've got scandals that are billions of dollars. Congratulations, you guys are the first. And hopefully this will be the first government in Canadian history that has a majority of them go to jail for their crimes against Canadian citizens.
We're the first government in the history of Canada that has deployed a credible plan to fight our climate pollution. And we're the first government in the history of Canada that have results to show for it. Do we need to
deploy a successful plan of money laundering
to do more? Absolutely. And I'm sorry, Vashi, I often watch your shows. I missed it when Minister Wilkinson was there. I was talking with
I must have missed that one. I didn't see that one.
him yesterday.
Look at her face. She doesn't believe him. She's getting a whiff of his bull crap through the monitor.
The emissions cap for the oil and gas sector. And what he told me is that he's still on board with moving forward with that regulation.
Maybe because he decided not to run. It was a few days before he had made that decision.
Now, in contrast, let's jump over to this Check News podcast. They released the full video. They had a teaser that went out last week. And just listen to how Pierre Poilievre talks about this exact same topic.
You talked about your Axe the Tax rally. That's been something that you've said a lot of, and it's certainly resonated with a lot of people.
Yes.
I am interested because the environment is a very big focus for a lot of people, especially here on Vancouver Island. So the former Secretary General of the UN says climate change is the single greatest threat to a sustainable future. We're seeing, of course, historic wildfires in California right now. Every summer, there's a wildfire season in BC. So how do you make sure Canada still hits the carbon emissions targets while axing that tax?
Well, first of all, I think we have to realize this is a global problem. So, but, by raising taxes on our businesses, all we do is drive production to more polluting foreign jurisdictions. And so, for example, we have a tomato farm in my riding. They pay a carbon tax on the CO2 they release into their greenhouse, even though it's absorbed by the plant life. Well, what does that mean? A Mexican tomato is now more affordable in my community than a local Manotick tomato. So people are then incentivized to buy the tomato that had to be trucked and trained right across North America from Mexico because they don't have the Canadian carbon tax.
That is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. This is true. So these farmers have to pay the carbon tax on carbon that does not go into the environment. As he says, it gets eaten up in the greenhouse because that's what it is. It's plant food.
I want to bring that production home, and that means axing the tax. I also want to displace dirty foreign energy with clean Canadian energy. For example, LNG. When we send LNG from, as we will soon be doing, from Kitimat to Asia, we displace dirtier forms of energy. According to the chief economist of National Bank, if we were able to supply India with half of its electrical demand from our natural gas, rather than having them go with coal, he would displace 2.5 billion tons of greenhouse gases, which is 3 times the total emissions of the entire Canadian economy. So I want to rapidly greenlight these LNG projects as one of the ways that we can displace dirtier forms of energy.
I mean, Canada is the 11th highest CO2 emitter in the world. And a lot of those plans you talk about are more long-term, which long-term that would make sense.
Why should they be so long-term?
But they are long-term because it takes a while to build these plants.
Well, it takes longer to get them approved, unfortunately, because we have the second slowest building permits in the OECD. The Germans went from concept to completion on an LNG import terminal in 194 days.
Right.
Like, this is how the real world. The problem is we don't live in the real world. We live in Canada right now where you can't get anything done.
That's just over half a year. Like, that's what we need in our country to turn things around quickly.
Net zero by 2050, a goal that you want to continue to pursue?
Look, I think we have to live in the real world. The bottom line is that all of our infrastructure is built around traditional hydrocarbons. And if we think we're going to completely eliminate that in 15 or 20, 25 years, I think that is a pipe dream.
Once again, common sense coming from Pierre Poilievre. You never hear anything like that from Gibo. Even the banks know it's a scam and are ditching net zero policies. Yeah, they just did it because Trudeau and Biden were in power, so they went along with it. And now this clown show is nearly over and done with. They're ditching that policy. Net zero timelines are ridiculous. Next up, we got a story here of 1/3 of Canadians turning to online for their doctor needs because we don't have doctors in our country anymore because Justin Trudeau forced them all out of the country.
The Canadian Medical Association says more than 1/3 of Canadians are turning to online health information because they don't have regular access to a doctor.
As CTV's health reporter Pauline Chan tells us, officials are worried people are receiving inaccurate information.
The online survey done last November found that 37% of respondents used medical information they found online because they don't have a regular doctor.
Over 6.5 million Canadians don't have access to a family doctor.
And Dr. Joss Reimer says 23% of the 3,700 people surveyed reported negative results after following online health advice.
Something as small as they had a stomach ache to a really severe health outcome. But these are only the 23% that recognized it or were willing to admit that they had a bad outcome from following health advice online. So sometimes the consequences are life or death, and sometimes they're much less severe, but this is a big issue.
The head of the CMA says no other generation has been exposed to so much misinformation, with Canada experiencing a shortage of family doctors.
COVID happened, and that's caused a lot of burnout, a lot of people decreasing their hours, leaving the profession. But these problems were before COVID as well. It just made it worse. And part of it's just simply demographics. As the population is aging, we have that big cohort of baby boomers. That does two things. More people have more complex health needs. And so they're coming in and they're needing more care. But it also means that the family physicians are more likely to be baby boomers. So they themselves are looking at retirement.
Reimer recommends that if Canadians do use online health information, they should go to trusted resources such as the Public Health Agency of Canada. And some health issues can be dealt with by other health professionals, such as pharmacists or social workers.
Our country's in bad state. Can you blame Canadians turning to online to try to solve these problems? I personally use AI. I talk to it. I say, I've got this, I've got that. What could this be? It gives me 3 or 4 things. I start trying to fix the problem. That's what happens when Justin Trudeau increases capital gains, increases taxes, just makes life so unaffordable in Canada. Doctors from Canada are getting snapped up down in America. They make so much more money down there. It's not even comparable. There needs to be serious incentives to keep doctors here. And we've got people coming over from other countries who are doctors, but they can't practice here because our laws are stupid.